sorry, it keeps falling in. I thought it was. So yeah, Canyon Pines. So that's kind of where this started. But that's another example of kind of the efforts that they made. I thought that was interesting and pretty cool. So I wish we had more time to go into that, but you guys can look at that later. Now, moving on to page 5, what is also on the screen. This was a document, once again, in the research papers that was actually presented to the public from the research committee throughout their different meetings they had, not just independently with the committees and the subcommittees, but also for the public. So this is a pro and cons handout that they provided everybody. I'm happy to go through it, or we can read it later. You guys can read it independently, but I can tell you one of the top pros consistently in statements made throughout the committee members' discussions back then is more control over services and just more control overall and the protection of our wonderful life up here. And they also discussed some cons, but again, you can go over that later. Moving on to page 6, which is titled Coal Creek Canyon Incorporation Research Results. This is a copy of what they presented in a meeting publicly at the CCIA Hall on October 1st, 1997 at 7 p.m. We're not going to get into this, but I thought this might be interesting because it helps break down sections that they ended up having subcommittees on. They started from scratch. They had no idea how this worked. They didn't understand legal, statutory requirements. So they started brand new. They took on an amazing effort. I have the most respect for what they did and how they dove into something really, really significant. But in the end, what they did, they created multiple subcommittees. One subcommittee looked at boundaries. One subcommittee looked at legal and safety. One looked at petitions, because petitioning is part of the process of incorporation. They also looked at road and bridges. Accounting was another subgroup, and town name and organization. So that's fun to read over if you have nothing else to do. Okay, so moving on to page 7. This is a revised copy, revised on April 1998 from, again, the research group, discussing more potential benefits and possible negative impacts. Probably don't need to get all into that. I did attempt to do that last night, didn't work out very well, so we can get in depth, maybe another meeting about it if we get to that place at some point, or you guys are welcome to spend time on it as well. But it is really good information. Page 8 that I included is from a gentleman named Mike. Mike was on the committee, and he lived up here. I'm not sure if he still does. I actually haven't spoken to him. But I thought it was important to read his letter, and in there you'll notice also his concerns or questions about control over housing density, control over what city people from imposing urban life on the mountain people, control of natural looking areas, control by pressuring forest services to do stuff, and control that will provide organization ready to prevent coring of scar top that could deplete our canyon water supply. So I'm not sure what scar top was. Maybe some people do know what that was. Oh, okay. So something was happening at that point that was relevant to him, and he listed in here. I thought that was some fun reading, and awesome that he put that work and came to that conclusion and had those questions. The next one is that there's a number of these, but I just threw in ones that I thought were relevant or specific that had something to say. So I did talk to this gentleman, Joel.
What page is that?
Oh, I'm sorry, page 9.
Thank you.
And it's from Joel Kozpek? What is it? Chopek. So he's an awesome guy in my opinion. He basically in this, he concluded that it's not feasible because of the road and bridges. He was part of that subcommittee. He went and figured out numbers and had discussions and all the details that are required with roads and bridges, specifically with Jefferson County mostly, but also the other Boulder County and Gilpin County. And so his concern was it wasn't feasible at that time because operation costs were so high. So that's a good one to read, but this is my favorite section of his letter, is the last sentence where he said, on a whole, it was an interesting endeavor, and I actually enjoyed doing the research for what I thought was a worthwhile cause. So I agree with him, it was. And he did a great job. Moving on to pages. Now I included some emails in here too, because there's some fun details and interesting conversations that were had. I'm not going to get into really any of them. I included this for you guys to read, because a lot of things that are being said now are also discussions that were happening then. And as they determined that and questions as they went down the road, it's in here. So there's a lady named Mia, which I've never met. She used to be the president of CCIA, from what I understand. And this is the next two pages, pages 10 and 11, are from Mia regarding topics about the incorporation committee, town organization name, etc. I found all that fascinating. You might think it's completely stupid and redundant, but it was a fun adventure for me. So hopefully you can find some good stuff in there, little treasures here and there. Moving on to page 12 and 13. Oddly, how this was scanned in, it came out a little funky, but pages 12, 13, 14, and 15 through 16, it actually is one of the incorporation meeting notes that they did. They were very organized. It's impressive. So I thought that would be fun. One of the things I did learn in here was that Jefferson County back in 1998, through various conversations they were having, made it very clear that they were already having budget issues. So I found that surprising because I didn't know it went all the way back to then, where they were already having budget issues, having a hard time manage things up here, which seemed to be well recognized at that time. So that's good reading. Please make some effort and read that when you get a chance. Moving on to page 17. Let me just get this on the screen. This is just another example of what the committee did to do. What they were looking for is a potential survey to be done by the community, work with the community to see how much the community would be willing to pay for incorporation. Not so far sure how far they got on that, but basically the conclusion I see on this document is it was an average of $360 a year among committee members at that time, from just them surveying themselves of how much they would be willing to pay per family to help incorporate. So I thought that was interesting and fun, and possibly another idea that could be utilized and perhaps just a bit updated. All right, moving on to page 18. Hopefully these are in order because I think I may have messed these a tiny bit up.
They're not.
Okay, so sorry. So you should, this page 18, or what should be, what we're on now, is expenses. It's the Coal Creek Canyon Incorporation Research Project budget. This is pretty much where the meeting ended last night and went somewhat downhill. So we're not gonna go over how they broke this down. It is pretty fascinating. I know that these numbers, for example, law enforcement at $100,000 isn't realistic. I think that's just common sense because something in 1998 is not gonna be the same price it's gonna be in 2024. So, you know, paid staff, legal, I chuckled because in one of the breakdowns they had a part-time judge for $5,000 a year. That was hilarious. So they have two budgets on here. They have a full budget they came up with after a ton of work, tons and tons of work, and then they have a slash and burn budget. So very interesting information to go into.
What are the numbers, total numbers?
So the annual budget they had come up with just for the full budget was $1,027,000.
And that's almost 30 years ago?
Yeah. And then their slash and burn budget was like a little bit under 800,000. And then on the second, well, page 19, hopefully, we have a copy of their income. Now this was the summary after 6 months of work of the budget of where the town would get money from. Okay, I think it's actually really important because it actually shows the potential monies that they already saw that could come into a town, such as cigarette sales, like taxes, motor vehicle monies that would come back to a town, road and bridge monies that would come back to a town, So they have their slash and burn income and they have their full budget. So very interesting to look at that. Unfortunately, the ultimate conclusion of well, it wasn't unfortunate. I think that's the wrong word to use. I think the responsible conclusion was because they were fact finders. That was their job and their role is to fact find. And they came back and they told the community the summary and their conclusion. And the conclusion was, we did a lot of great work. We had a great time. We learned a lot. We think this is a potentially good idea, but unfortunately it's not going to work unless we raise property taxes, which clearly was a no-go, and no one wanted that at that point, and no one wants that now. So that's why it didn't move forward. They did give some allocation and suggestions of maybe why it can be re-explored in the future. You know, threw a few ideas in there. So that was the conclusion. So on page 20 and 21, you will see two maps. These are copies of two maps that they created, boundary lines. So in order to get a lot of numbers and data that are required, well, that they needed or are just required in general as part of the process for incorporation, you have to have a map or a boundary area of the geographic that the municipality would be in. So they had two maps that they had concluded and gained data and based it off of. I cannot break down this map in full. I've had other people look at it before tonight who are much more familiar with the canyon, so hopefully you guys understand it better than me. But I'm giving you this as a copy, an example. This is not a suggestion. This is not what I'm pushing for. This is just simply an example of what their research committee had come up with, and I'm providing you to look at it.